Good evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Today, we will be looking at the ways in which internal political dynamics have been affected by the pandemic. Political scientist Burak B.Özpek will be joining us, but first, let's take a look at the developments of the week. As of this morning, Turkey's death from the coronavirus increased to 356, as the number of confirmed cases rose to 18,135. The number of tests conducted in the last 24 hours has been 18,757, bringing the total number of tests conducted in Turkey to 125,556 since the outbreak began.
The government shared the geographic locations of cases for the first time on April 1. Health Minister Fahrettin Koca said that the virus has spread to each of Turkey's 81 provinces. Istanbul has 8,852 patients, which constitutes 60% of all cases in the country. Istanbul was followed by Izmir with 853 cases and Ankara with 712 cases. Koca also said that 601 health workers have been infected by the virus in Turkey. Later on April 1, Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu warned that intercity travel will be further restricted in the coming days. Our message to citizens is very clear. Do not travel from one city to the other. Stay at home. We will make it harder for you, he told broadcaster CNN Türk. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan said that the government will step up containment measures if the coronavirus outbreak grows and people ignore a voluntary quarantine. Turkey quarantined a total of 39 settlements in 18 provinces to curb the spread of the virus. The settlements include 1 town, 6 neighborhoods, 28 villages, and 4 hamlets. Although the quarantine towns are located in a wide area from east to the west of the country, they are mostly in less populated provinces. Only 3 provinces that have populations higher than 750,000 include quarantine settlements: Mardin, Malatya, and Van. In Istanbul, Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu has pushed for a lockdown to slow the spread of the virus because millions of people are still going to work each day, yet no settlements have been quarantined yet. Earlier in the week, the Interior Ministry banned visits to picnic areas, forests, and seashores across Turkey on weekends. Turkey has sent medical aid packages to Italy and Spain with Jalaluddin Rumi's words, "There is hope after despair and many suns after darkness," read the banners placed on the aid packages. "From Turkey to the people of Spain, Italy, with love," they added.
Due to the lack of transparency of the central government, the Turkish Medical Association began publishing its own figures, tracking the virus's spread as well as the shortages in the health sectors in a weekly report. Further, the medical personnel have been the target of suppression due to their public warnings regarding the virus.
In the weekly report, the Turkish Medical Association has announced that healthcare workers are still having serious shortage of personal protective equipment such as masks, gloves, and gowns. The report has underlined that health workers have been providing medical services under a great risk, causing anxiety and fear. Accordingly, the association has called on the Ministry of Health to improve the working conditions at medical institutions and to fully provide health workers with the necessary personal protective equipments. Critical Care Nurses Association warned on April 1 that Turkey has a shortage of about 15,000 intensive care nurses who are essential to COVID-19 treatment. While the Health Ministry promised to appoint 11,000 nurses to combat the coronavirus outbreak, Association Chair Ebru Kraner noted that these nurses will not be ready to fill in during the crisis. "It takes us 5 years to mentor an expert intensive care nurse. So we suggest that instead of placing the new assignments in intensive care, we should transfer seasoned nurses who have experience in intensive care to this department," Kraner said. Further, the Turkish Medical Association has also been sharing province-based figures on the pandemic. According to the figures, over 100 physicians and health workers have been infected in Istanbul so far. Cemil Taşçıoğlu, an internal medicine professor of Istanbul Çapa University, has become the first doctor to die of coronavirus in Turkey. The Turkish Medical Association said that Taşçıoğlu had contracted the virus while treating the country's first confirmed coronavirus patient. Taşçıoğlu, who was 67 years old, was placed under quarantine on March 16 after showing symptoms of the virus. Meanwhile, A group of healthcare workers who tried to make an announcement in front of Ankara University's hospital regarding the necessary precautions that should be taken against coronavirus were taken into custody on Tuesday in Ankara. 5 people in total were taken into custody. Moreover, Yusuf Savran, a doctor at İzmir's 9 Eylül University, has issued an apology to the public and to the government after a statement in which he said the number of cases of coronavirus and deaths caused by the virus in Turkey was worse than Italy's. Savran released a second video in which he apologized to elders in the state. It was the second time that a doctor had to rescind a statement they had made relating to the coronavirus.
Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu answered the questions of Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır. İmamoğlu and Çakır touched upon the major problems facing Istanbul during this time of crisis, the precautions taken by the municipality, and the lack of communication and coordination they have had with the central government and President Erdogan. İmamoğlu called on the central government to announce a minimum of a 2-week quarantine for Istanbul.
İstanbul'un en acil konusu ve sorunu İstanbullunun sizin yaptığınız gibi evde kalmasını sağlayabilmek.
The most pressing issue facing Istanbul is stopping mobility. When we look at the data, there is a threefold increase in the number of people who used public transport from Sunday to Monday. The numbers for Monday show that there were more than 1,100,000 people using public transportation. We are having trouble stopping mobility. It doesn't seem that people are internalizing the notion of self-quarantine. The health minister made an important warning about this, but there needs to be an official rule put out there. There is no other way to prevent the spread. So Istanbul's biggest need is the implementation of a quarantine. I don't know about other cities, but the numbers for Istanbul show that 60% of the positive cases are located here. If this spread is not stopped, there are going to be serious problems facing us. This is our major concern.
Bu kural koymadan olması, tüm insanların bunu içselleştirmesi mümkün gözükmüyor. Türkiye'nin en büyük kenti 16 milyon insanın sorununu çözüme kavuşturmaya çalışan.
As the mayor of Turkey's most populated city, as someone who is fighting to find solutions to this major crisis by trying to communicate with institutions and manage the process in the best way possible, I expect to be included in the decision-making process by both the relevant ministers and the president. I would like to be contacted and considered as a partner to find solutions in this process. We can present our data and provide insight as to what can be done. Imagine that the governor was only able to contact us 1 month after everything began. I say able to because unfortunately I do not believe that he can take any initiative. It was not until Sunday that we were able to get together with the governor, and I had contacted him at least 5 to 6 times prior to that, stating that we need to get together, work together, and collaborate on finding a solution to the crisis.
Yoksa onun öncesinde ben 5-6 kez Sayın Valimize bir araya gelelim, konuşmamız lazım, bu iş bütüncül yönetilmeli. Tabii ki görüşemedik. Görüşmeyi isteriz.
We were not able to speak on the phone nor meet with President Erdogan. We would like to do so. We would like for him to call us and ask about what is happening in Istanbul. We would like to be able to contact him and inform him on the situation. Communication is valuable. Let me be very clear. When developments are taking place so rapidly, I am ashamed to look and see what we have to deal with, the type of things we are talking about. We have to stop this and come together.
Turkey's coronavirus response hit another friction point on Tuesday when the Interior Minister issued a circular banning coronavirus donation campaigns, such as those initiated by the opposition mayors of Ankara and Istanbul.
Istanbul Metropolitan Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu and Ankara Mayor Mansur Yavaş, both of the main opposition Republican People's Party, established fundraising campaigns to help individuals and families affected by the coronavirus and its economic impacts. But a circular issued by the Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu was sent to municipalities across Turkey on March 31, which said that the donation campaigns of the municipalities are against regulations. The ministry said Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu's campaign contravened a law requiring that permission be sought from authorities before collecting money for the needy, and said it would act against those responsible. Shortly after the notice, bank accounts used by Istanbul and Ankara municipalities were blocked. The campaigns were halted Tuesday after President Erdogan announced he would launch a nationwide fundraiser Monday evening to support citizens in need amid the pandemic. Erdogan launched his National Solidarity campaign by saying he would donate 7 months of his own salary. Various state institutions, firms, and politicians followed the president's lead and made contributions. President Erdogan slammed the campaigns by saying there is no point in being a state within the state. Municipalities cannot launch campaigns without permission. 11 CHP metropolitan municipalities released a statement on April 1 saying that it's legal for the municipalities to accept donations. The fact that the Interior Ministry prevented receiving donations on grounds that are impossible to understand won't do any good, but will only increase the suffering of our citizens, the statement read. Both the Istanbul and Ankara metropolitan municipalities have filed a lawsuit against the Interior Ministry.
This evening, we have political scientist Burak B.Özpek with us. Good evening, Mr. Özpek. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So if we go back a little bit, the Ankara Metropolitan Municipality, followed by the Istanbul Municipality, started donation campaigns in order to help families in need amid the coronavirus outbreak. Following these initiatives, President Erdogan started a nationwide campaign donation, while the Interior Ministry banned municipalities from doing so, blocking the donation accounts of said municipalities. So how do you evaluate these developments in light of AKP's general approach to internal politics?
Okay, I think there's a problem regarding the integrity of state in Turkey. And this is because AK Party is regarding the process from the perspective of politics, not from the perspective of technicality, not from the perspective of public health, not from the perspective of economics. So there is an ongoing, controversial situation inside the Turkish bureaucracy and Turkish state. And AK Party is perceiving a threat from the local administrations towards its political survival, because Mansur Yavaş and Ekrem İmamoğlu are extremely charismatic figures. They won the latest elections, and they are running a very efficient campaign to win the hearts and minds of the people. And this is imposing a threat to AK Party's political game. And this is also, manifesting the fact that AK Party is not trying to solve the crisis stemming from the virus, and AK Party is trying to solve the crisis stemming from politics. So virus requires a political party in government to work hard to solve this problem and to implement some technical and rational policies. But instead of that, AK Party is trying to suppress alternative voices, alternative attempts, and alternative figures in Turkish politics. So I think the political motivation is the main motivation of AK Party while approaching to this crisis.
And when you think about the donation campaign as a measure in and of itself to manage such a crisis, what does it say in terms of the government's approach to solving the problems, the very real problems that are faced by the population at this moment?
Of course, local administration can work more efficient than central government. Mm-hmm. This means that they can get money from the funders, and they can distribute, they can efficiently organize the campaign. And at the end of the day, people who are suffering from the crisis, who are suffering from the virus, can get help very efficiently. But since AK Party regards this attempt of Ankara, those attempts of Ankara and Istanbul municipalities as a challenge to its political survival, it is trying to stop this, and it's trying to centralize every kind of attempt. And as I told you before, AK Party is not approaching to this problem from the perspective of public health and rationality and technicality. Political survival is the main motivation of AK Party. And if local administrations, if municipalities impose a threat towards the AK Party's political survival, AK Party could easily ignore public health, easily ignore economic problems, easily ignore the, happiness of the majority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even that being the case, a donation campaign has been initiated by Erdogan, but there have been kind of issues of transparency relating to money in the past, whether it be the taxes collected for the earthquakes or money coming from Europe for migrants. Erdogan has usually refused to divulge the details of how money has been spent. So do you think that this donation campaign will be successful in light of previous experiences?
No, I don't think that it will be successful. It will certainly fail. And this campaign will turn into a campaign of people who want to show their loyalty to the government. And I don't think that this campaign will be able to attract popular support. And transparency is a very serious problem regarding the AK Party's governance style, because, you know, AK Party is running the government, and government is responsible to collect tax. And in democracies, governments are supposed to be transparent in, you know, in spending money, in distributing money, and there should be some mechanisms checking and balancing government expenditures. So AK Party so far was so reluctant to be checked and balanced by parliament, by, you know, the independent judicial organizations, by media, by civil society organizations. Now we have another level. Not taxpayers' money is on the table. Now we have donations. So I don't think that AK Party will be, you know, enthusiastic to share information with public, will be enthusiastic to form institutions responsible to distribute this money, and AK Party will not share the information about the process with the public. That's why this campaign will fail.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking about sharing information and further issues of transparency, the government in this process has also been criticized when it came to divulging information regarding the geographic distribution of cases. But then they said it was with regards to respecting the privacy of the patients and so forth. But on Wednesday, this attitude and the strategy changed and the locations were finally revealed. So how do you read this change in strategy? Do you think it's a late realization of the seriousness of the situation or something else?
States who have sufficient capacity to organize counter-virus attempts, I think will not hide information from the public. But countries or states who suffer from lack of capacity, of course, will manipulate the information and will hide information, will not share information with the public. So the problems with infrastructure will be masked or will be, manipulated by the superstructure. By superstructure, I mean the regime type. Mm-hmm. If the regime type is democratic, problems with infrastructure could be transparent, like we are observing in Italy, in Spain. But if infrastructure is not sufficient, superstructure, which is authoritarian in this case, mm-hmm. Starts to manipulate the information and starts to hide the information in order to keep its position in the government. Turkey is not a democratic country. Turkey has some serious problems with its infrastructure capacity. State capacity is not very good in Turkey, and we don't have money in our central bank actually to distribute to people who are suffering from this virus crisis. So the superstructure is inclined to keep its position by manipulating the information. So we cannot expect transparency from this government, because this government has not sufficient capacity to recover the problems deriving from this crisis.
Mm-hmm. So you're not hopeful that a nationwide quarantine will be issued?
I don't think that. Because the economic power of Turkey is so limited. So far, AK Party has conducted extremely populist economic policies, and AK Party has spent too much money in order to keep its popularity in the eye of public. In this crisis, AK Party's, a failure to run a healthy, a stable economics became obvious, became apparent actually. And people are aware that AK Party has not sufficient capacity to sustain economy by the help of government funding. So economy should sustain itself by the help of its own capacity. And this prevents a quarantine to take place in Turkey.
I'd like to speak a little bit about the health minister, Fahrettin Koca, and what you think about the way in which he's been managing the situation, because I guess he has been the face of the crisis, addressing, the people on a daily basis, whereas, Erdogan, of course, he has made grand addresses, but not in the same manner as other country leaders have in Europe, for example. So how do you evaluate kind of this division of power?
Yes, he is face of the crisis, and this is very normal in a populist regime, because in populist regimes, charismatic leaders do not, burden the responsibility of potential failures. In case of a failure, Mr. Fahrettin Koca will be the victim of this process, and Erdogan will be able to save his face. He is going to sacrifice Mr. Koca, and he is going to, keep his position again. That's why we are familiar with Fahrettin Koca more than Erdogan nowadays. And I have no idea whether he is successful or not. He is just a normal guy, informing people like a public relations agency. He is giving numbers. He is saying that we have to be cautious. No more, no less, actually. He's just a normal guy. There is no success story here. There is no legendary story here. He is just a guy. He is just face of the crisis, and he is going to be sacrificed in case of a failure by Erdogan.
And what do you think about the opposition parties at large? I mean, as you know, the opposition parties have taken over the municipalities of major cities in last year's election. So how do you see their crisis management strategies so far, especially since they have been kind of excluded from the decision-making processes of the central government?
There is a serious problem with Turkish opposition here, because so far AK Party could suspend the opposition's criticisms towards its foreign policy, towards its economic policy, or towards its policy against terrorist organizations. National unity became a very efficient tool in the hand of AK Party to suppress or to suspend alternative voices in the society. But now we have another crisis, and this crisis is not coming from another country, is not coming from a terrorist organization, is not coming from any social or political group. This is not a subjective, this is not a debatable, or this is not a controversial issue. This is a fact, actually. And struggle against a fact requires some technical arrangements and technical regulations. And opposition parties are supposed to suggest their own alternative, roadmaps in order to overcome this crisis. This is very normal in a democracy. For us to be more secure, for us to be more healthy, for our economy to be more stable, opposition parties should challenge or should criticize or should suggest their own alternative roadmap to the government. Of course, government will be reluctant to accept those suggestions. Of course, the government will pursue such suggestions as a threat to its power. But opposition parties should understand that there is a policy making room here. And this threat, the virus, is not coming from any other political entity. So this is a war against a fact. This is a war against a virus. And this is a war against the economic failure, economic plight, actually. So, of course, technicality, of course, rationality should take place in order to overcome this crisis. Mm-hmm. And this is a very free policy-making room for the opposition parties, actually. They need strong psychology, sufficient courage, and sufficient technical knowledge in order to present their own suggestions.
Mm-hmm. So they should basically continue doing what it is that they're doing, and not only in terms of the political parties, but all kind of oppositions, organizations that are recommending the government.
Of course.
Yeah.
Shirin, I'm an independent intellectual, I'm an independent academic, and I'm criticizing government, okay?
Mr. Özpek, I think we lost you, your voice.
I'm sorry. I'm an independent researcher, I'm an independent intellectual, I'm an independent academic. I'm criticizing the government, and this is very normal. I'm not insulting to anyone, I'm not polarizing to society, I'm not, justifying the violence. I'm just criticizing the technical deficiencies of war against the virus. Mm-hmm. If opposition parties do not say anything, if opposition parties do not criticize the government, I attract the attention of government, and there remains no barrier between me and the government. I expect opposition parties to voice some ideas instead of me, and to protect me, so that I can speak freely and I can speak in a secure way. Mm-hmm. If opposition parties keep their silence, of course I will be in danger. Because if they do not say anything, government's policy becomes a national objective policy. But I think this is not an objective area of talking about the virus. This is a subjective area. Mm-hmm. Different people might have different suggestions. Different people might have different roadmaps. And in a democracy, public debate should be open for different ideas. And this creates a more efficient policy mm-hmm. in fighting against virus. But this is not a democracy, I know. And the government wants to suppress all alternative voices in the society. And if opposition parties keep their silence, I will feel in danger. I will feel threatened by the government, and I will keep my silence as well. That's the point. I'm expecting opposition parties to voice, to say their criticisms, and to present their roadmaps, actually.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, Mr. Özpek, in line with that, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's a strategy to survive politically or not, there is an urgent crisis that needs to be addressed. And what needs to be done is not being done because of everything that you mentioned, basically, about AKP's strategy to politically survive this crisis. So do you think what needs to happen for the pressing issues to be addressed, for the government to realize that they need to be addressed and they cannot be postponed further?
In Europe, we have some cases which could be good examples for Turkey. Mm-hmm. First of all, we have to keep people in their houses. For this to happen, government should provide sufficient money to the market in order to sustain economic activities. But government does not have sufficient funds to do so. So I think the capacity problem that AK Party has is creating a new method for them to deal with, for them to address this crisis. Instead of providing money to the market, instead of making some regulations, instead of having a roadmap to address this crisis, AK Party is trying to politicize this issue by creating polarization in the society and by making this issue as a political issue. This is a strategy of the AK Party. So this is not a technical issue for the AK Party. This is just a political issue for the AK Party, because the technical solutions actually are apparent. You have to keep people in their houses. You have to sustain economy by the help of the government, and you have to wait, actually. But since AK Party does not have sufficient capacity to follow this strategy, it is doing a very populist. It is following a very populist strategy, polarizing the society, politicizing the issue, creating a very artificial debate with Ankara and Istanbul mayors, and trying to address this crisis by the help of this strategy, actually.
Burak B.Özpek, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You are welcome. You are welcome.
The Turkish government is preparing to grant amnesties to up to 1/3 of the country's prison population in order to combat the coronavirus pandemic. Yet jailed human rights activists, journalists, and opposition politicians will not be among those considered for early release.
The Turkish parliament discussed a legal amendment on Tuesday which should make 90,000 of the country's approximately 300,000 prisoners eligible for either house arrest or parole by halving sentences for offenses including non-premeditated murder and organized crime. Early drafts of the bill, which would also have covered sex offenders and those convicted of gender-based violence, were dropped after being met with outrage from women's rights groups. While rights groups have welcomed some of the new measures to keep inmates safe from coronavirus, such as alternative incarceration or home arrest for those over 65, those with pre-existing conditions and female prisoners with young children, as well as political prisoners, have been overlooked. The Have You Heard initiative has released a statement and a new video about imprisoned journalists, saying that journalists should go out before the virus enters prisons. While announcing some measures, the government leaves journalists and politicians who did nothing beyond expressing their thoughts to their fates in prisons. Time is running out. The United Nations Human Rights Council, Amnesty International, European Union parliamentarians, International PEN, and others reiterate their calls on Turkey. Empty the prisons before it's too late, the statement said. Moreover, Reporters Without Borders said that 7 journalists have been arrested for their reporting on the pandemic and charged with spreading panic, and 385 people are being investigated for critical social media posts.
Medyascope correspondent için conducted an exclusive interview with the head of the EU delegation to Turkey, Christian Berger. Berger answered İçin's questions regarding the EU management of the coronavirus pandemic and its relations with Turkey in the process. Berger also commented on a potential new deal regarding refugees between the EU and Turkey.
Yes, as I said before, we are in close touch with the authorities. We have received some requests and some questions here or there. What we can do, how we can cooperate. We also have at the level of the services. We will have a video conference very soon to look into this. What the needs are, where we can help. I mean, as you know, we have a number of important health projects in Turkey which we could improve, which we could beef up and strengthen and broaden. There is one, as you know, we do a lot of health work for Syrians who are present in Turkey. So there has been a suggestion that we step that up, because there is obviously this is a vulnerable group. And we don't want to spread the disease there. But it's not only that, it's also with that we also would help the host communities. So there are a lot of ideas that we are looking in at the moment. So I can't give you the details right now, but these are issues that we are in close contact and in touch with the relevant authorities on the Turkish side, because we also need to understand what the needs are. As you know, the President Erdogan was in Brussels on the 9th of March. This was one of the issues discussed, and the High Representative, together with the Foreign Minister of Turkey, Mr. Çavuşoğlu, were asked to follow up, and these discussions are going on. So we are in close touch with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to see what the needs are, where we need to adjust, where we need to improve the implementation of the agreement of 2016. We all know that Turkey had additional number of people coming into the country since 2016, not only Syrians, but also the last few months and maybe the last year and a half, people also across the Iranian border, Afghanis in particular. So there's a changed situation, and we are of course, we said that we fully understand the migratory pressure that Turkey is under, and we, as we did already before 2016, we are ready to help. We will, and we're working now with the relevant counterparts, what their needs are, where adjustment is needed, really to address this additional burden on Turkey.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.